The Galactic Empire had ruled the stars for centuries, its influence stretching across thousands of planets and systems. It was a time of peace, or so it seemed. The Empire's vast archives contained records of every species, technology, and threat known to exist. Nothing escaped their notice, or so they believed. But all of that changed on a quiet day aboard the flagship vessel Eternal Vanguard. Deep in the uncharted reaches of space, Captain Ethan Cole was sitting in his quarters when the urgent message came through. He wasn't expecting anything out of the ordinary. Most days were filled with routine patrols and minor diplomatic missions. But this call was different. It came directly from Admiral Lavra Hayes, one of the highest-ranking officers in the Imperial fleet. Her voice was tense, almost panicked, as she spoke. "Ethan, we have a situation," she said, her words clipped. "The scout fleet sent to explore the Helios Nebula, it's gone. No survivors, no wreckage, just silence." Ethan leaned forward, his brow furrowing. "What do you mean, gone?" he asked. "Did they send any distress signals?" "No," Admiral Hayes replied. "That's what makes this so troubling. They were supposed to check in every 6 hours. When they missed their last transmission, we sent another ship to investigate. That ship never returned either." Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. Losing one fleet was bad enough, but two? Something wasn't right. "Do we have any data at all?" he asked. "We've got fragments," Hayes admitted. "Scout drones managed to capture some sensor readings before they went offline. I'm sending them to you now." "We need your expertise, Ethan. Whatever happened out there, it's not in our archives." A few moments later, the files appeared on Ethan's screen. He opened them immediately, scrolling through line after line of raw data. At first glance, it didn't make sense. There were energy spikes unlike anything he'd ever seen, followed by sudden drops to near-zero levels. It was as if something had consumed the fleets entirely, leaving behind nothing but emptiness. Ethan knew he couldn't handle this alone. He reached out to Dr. Rachel Bennett, a xenobiologist stationed on planet Solace. Rachel was known for her ability to think outside the box, and if anyone could make sense of these strange readings, it was her. Within hours, she arrived at the command center, her eyes wide with curiosity as she reviewed the information. "This doesn't look natural," Rachel said after studying the data for several minutes. "These energy patterns, they're too precise. It's almost like communication? Ethan repeated, frowning. "You think whatever did this is intelligent?" "It's possible," Rachel replied. "But if it is, it's operating on a level far beyond anything we've encountered before. Look at these fluctuations here." She pointed to a series of jagged lines on the screen. "They're repeating in sequences. Patterns like this usually indicate language or code." Admiral Hayes listened intently as Rachel explained her findings. "So you're saying this could be a new species?" she asked. "Or an old one," Rachel corrected. "Something ancient, maybe even older than the Empire itself? If that's true, then we're dealing with something incredibly powerful and potentially dangerous." The weight of her words hung heavy in the air. For decades, the Galactic Empire had prided itself on its knowledge and control. Its archives were considered infallible, a testament to humanity's dominance over the cosmos. But now, faced with the unknown, that confidence wavered. Ethan glanced at the holographic map displayed in the center of the room. The Helios Nebula loomed large, its swirling clouds of gas and dust hiding untold secrets. Somewhere within those depths lay the answer to the mystery, but also, perhaps, the source of the Empire's greatest fear. "We need to go there," Ethan said finally. "Send a team to investigate." Admiral Hayes hesitated. "Are you sure about this?" "We don't know what we're up against." "That's exactly why we need to find out," Ethan countered. "If this thing can take out 2 fleets without breaking a sweat, we can't afford to ignore it. Ignorance won't protect us." After a long pause, Hayes nodded. "All right, assemble your crew. But be careful, Ethan. This isn't just about solving a puzzle, it's about survival." With the Admiral's approval, Ethan began putting together a small team for the mission. First on his list was Lieutenant Daniel Hughes, a skilled pilot whose calm demeanor masked a fierce determination. Daniel had flown countless missions, and was known for his ability to navigate even the trickiest situations. Next, he recruited Commander Ava Lewis, a strategist who had risen quickly through the ranks thanks to her sharp mind and tactical brilliance. Finally, Dr. Rachel Bennett agreed to join them, eager to continue her analysis firsthand. Together, they boarded the Nova Seeker, a sleek exploration cruiser designed for both speed and stealth. Equipped with advanced scanning equipment and defensive systems, it was the perfect vessel for venturing into the unknown. As the ship prepared for departure, Ethan gathered his crew in the briefing room. "Our objective is simple," he told them. "We need to figure out what happened to those fleets, and whether whatever caused it poses a threat to the Empire. Stay alert, stay focused, and remember, we're flying blind here. Trust your instincts." The journey to the Helios Nebula took several days, during which the crew reviewed the available data and ran simulations based on Rachel's theories. The closer they got, the more uneasy everyone became. Even Daniel, who rarely showed fear, admitted he had a bad feeling about the mission. When they finally entered the nebula, the atmosphere aboard the Nova Seeker grew tense. The ship's instruments began acting strangely almost immediately. Lights flickered, and the navigation system started giving inconsistent readings. Rachel worked tirelessly to recalibrate the scanners, but the interference only worsened. Then, something unexpected happened. Strange symbols began appearing on the monitors, glowing faintly against the backdrop of static. They pulsed rhythmically, almost like a heartbeat. Rachel stared at them, her eyes widening with realization. "These aren't random glitches," she said. "They're deliberate. Someone or something is trying to talk to us." Ethan frowned. "Talk to us or warn us? I don't know yet," Rachel admitted. "But if I can decode these symbols, we might be able to understand what they're trying to say." As Rachel worked, the crew kept watch, scanning the surrounding area for any signs of movement. Hours passed, and still, there was nothing, just the eerie glow of the nebula and the persistent pulsing of the symbols. Then, suddenly, the ship shuddered violently. Alarms blared as everyone scrambled to their stations. "What's happening?" Ethan demanded. "I don't know," Daniel shouted back, struggling to stabilize the ship. "It's like something's pulling us in." On the main viewer, a massive shape began to emerge from the darkness. It was unlike anything they'd ever seen, a swirling mass of light and shadow, constantly shifting and changing. It radiated power, filling the room with an oppressive sense of awe. Rachel gasped. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "And terrifying," Ava added grimly. Whatever it was, it dwarfed the Nova Seeker. Tendrils of energy extended toward the ship, wrapping around it like fingers. The crew braced themselves for impact, but instead of attacking, the entity paused, as if studying them. Rachel's voice broke the silence. "It's probing us," she said. "Not physically, mentally. It's searching for something." "For what?" Ethan asked. "I don't know," Rachel replied. "But I think it wants to communicate." Ethan nodded slowly. "Then let's give it something to listen to." With Rachel's help, he composed a simple message using the decoded symbols. It was a gesture of goodwill, acknowledging the entity's presence and expressing a desire for understanding. They transmitted the message, holding their breath as they waited for a response. For several agonizing minutes, there was nothing. Then, slowly, the tendrils withdrew, and the entity receded into the depths of the nebula. The ship stabilized, and the alarms fell silent. "Well," Daniel said, breaking the tension, "that was something." Ethan exhaled deeply, realizing he'd been holding his breath. "Agreed. Let's get back to base and report what we found." As the Nova Seeker turned to leave the nebula, Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that they had barely scratched the surface of what this entity truly was. Whatever it was far more complex and far more dangerous than anyone had anticipated. The Nova Seeker emerged from the Helios Nebula with its crew shaken but alive. Captain Ethan Cole sat in the command chair, his hands gripping the armrests as he replayed the encounter in his mind. The massive entity, whatever it was, had spared them, but that didn't mean they were safe. It had communicated in a way no one fully understood, and its motives remained a mystery. One thing was clear: humanity's dominance of the galaxy was no longer guaranteed. When they returned to Planet Solace, the Imperial Council convened immediately. Admiral Lavra Hayes stood at the head of the table, her expression grave as she addressed the room. "We've reviewed the data," she said. "This thing is unlike anything we've ever seen. If it wanted to destroy us, it could have done so easily. Instead, it let you go." "Why?" Ethan leaned forward, his voice steady despite the tension. "In the air. It wasn't just observing us," he explained. "It was studying us. Dr. Bennett believes it may be trying to communicate, but on a level we don't yet understand." Dr. Rachel Bennett nodded, standing beside him. She held up a tablet displaying the strange symbols they'd encountered. "These patterns aren't random," she said. "They're structured almost like a language. I think this entity is intelligent and ancient. Based on the energy signatures we detected, it might predate the Empire by millions of years." The council members exchanged uneasy glances. General Matthew Doyle, a stern-faced man with a reputation for aggression, spoke up. "You're telling me there's something out there older and possibly stronger than us, and now it knows we exist?" "That's exactly what I'm saying," Rachel replied. "But strength isn't the only factor here. This entity didn't attack us outright. It acted cautiously, almost curiously. That suggests it has rules or at least limits." Doyle frowned. "Rules or not, curiosity won't stop it if it decides we're a threat. We need to act before it does." Ethan shook his head. Acting without understanding would be a mistake. If this thing is as powerful as it seems, provoking it could lead to disaster. The debate raged on for hours, with voices rising and tempers flaring. Some council members sided with Ethan, advocating for caution and further study. Others, like Doyle, pushed for immediate action, arguing that waiting would only give the entity time to prepare. In the end, Admiral Hayes made the final decision. Ethan and his crew would return to the nebula to gather more information. But Doyle insisted on sending a second fleet under his command to monitor the situation from a distance. As the meeting adjourned, Ethan pulled Rachel aside. "What do you think?" he asked quietly. "Can we really learn enough to avoid conflict?" Rachel hesitated. "I want to believe we can," she admitted. "But this thing, it's beyond anything we've dealt with before. If we push too hard, or if Doyle gets trigger-happy, it could end badly." Ethan sighed. "Then we'll have to make sure neither of those things happens." The next morning, the Nova Seeker prepared for its second journey into the Helios Nebula. This time, the mood aboard the ship was heavier. Lieutenant Daniel Hughes worked silently at the controls, double-checking every system. Commander Ava Lewis reviewed tactical plans, though her usual confidence seemed tinged with doubt. Even Rachel, who had been eager to decode the entity's language, seemed quieter than usual. As they approached the nebula, the interference began again. Lights flickered, instruments malfunctioned, and the same glowing symbols appeared on the monitors. Rachel immediately set to work decoding them, hoping to find new clues about the entity's intentions. Meanwhile, Ethan kept a close eye on the sensors, watching for any sign of movement. "Captain," Ava said suddenly, pointing to the main viewer. "Look." A faint glow was visible in the distance, pulsating rhythmically. It was similar to the entity they'd encountered before, but smaller, almost like a fragment of it. The crew watched in silence as the glow grew brighter, eventually resolving into a swirling orb of light. "It's beautiful," Rachel murmured. "But what is it?" Before anyone could answer, the orb darted toward the ship, moving faster than anything they'd ever seen. Alarms blared as the crew scrambled to respond. Daniel fought to keep the Nova Seeker steady while Ava activated the defensive systems. But instead of attacking, the orb hovered just outside the viewport, its light shifting in complex patterns. "It's communicating again," Rachel said, her eyes glued to the monitors. "These patterns, they're different from the ones we saw last time, more complex." Ethan turned to her. "Can you understand them?" "I think so," she replied. "Give me a moment." As Rachel worked, the orb remained motionless, as if waiting. Minutes passed, and then Rachel gasped. "It's asking questions," she said, "about us. About our technology, our history, our intentions." "What kind of questions?" Ethan asked. "Basic ones for now," Rachel explained. "Things. Like, why are you here, and what do you seek?" But there's an underlying tone, almost like suspicion, Ethan nodded. Answer honestly? Tell it we came to learn, not to fight. Rachel typed furiously, translating their responses into the glowing symbols. The orb pulsed brighter in response, its movements becoming more erratic. Then abruptly, it shot away, disappearing into the depths of the nebula. Well, Daniel said dryly, that was anticlimactic. Maybe, Ava replied, or maybe it's testing us. Ethan agreed. Whatever it's doing, we can't afford to lose focus. Keep scanning the area. There's got to be more to this. Hours later, the crew detected another anomaly, a cluster of energy readings deep within the nebula. They decided to investigate, navigating carefully through the dense clouds of gas and dust. As they approached, the source of the readings became clear. It was wreckage. Pieces of ships floated silently in space, twisted and charred beyond recognition. This is what's left of the first fleet, Ava said grimly. And probably the second one too. Rachel studied the debris closely. There's no sign of bodies, she noted. Just metal and machinery. Whatever happened here, it didn't leave. Survivors? Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. So this thing doesn't just destroy, it erases. As they continued their analysis, Rachel discovered something unusual. Embedded in the wreckage were faint traces of the same energy signature they'd detected during their encounters with the entity. It's like it absorbed them, she said. Not just their ships, but everything, their knowledge, their memories, maybe even their consciousness. The implications were staggering. If the entity could consume entire fleets and integrate their essence into itself, it was far more advanced and far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. We need to warn the fleet, Ethan said urgently. If Doyle tries to engage, this thing, he'll regret it. But before they could act, a transmission came through from Doyle's flagship. Captain Cole, his voice boomed over the comms. We've detected your position. Stand down and return to base. This operation is under my authority now, Ethan clenched his jaw. General, listen to me. You don't understand what you're dealing with. This thing, I don't care what it is, Doyle interrupted. It's a threat, and threats must be neutralized. Now step aside and let the professionals handle this. Before Ethan could argue further, Doyle's fleet moved into formation, weapons armed and ready. The crew of the Nova Seeker watched helplessly as the ships advanced toward the heart of the nebula. Doyle's going to get everyone killed. Ava muttered. Ethan knew she was right. He turned to Rachel. How much progress have you made on the symbols? Enough to send a warning, she replied. But I don't know if it will listen. Send it anyway, Ethan ordered. Tell it we're not responsible for this aggression. Maybe it'll show mercy. Rachel worked quickly, transmitting the message as Doyle's fleet drew closer to the entity. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, without warning, the nebula erupted in a burst of light. The entity emerged, larger and more imposing than ever. Its tendrils lashing out with terrifying speed, Doyle's fleet opened fire, unleashing a barrage of missiles and energy beams. But the entity absorbed the attacks effortlessly, growing brighter with each impact. Then, with a single pulse of energy, it obliterated the entire fleet. Leaving behind only silence, the Nova Seeker-S crew stared in stunned horror as the debris drifted away. Ethan sank into his chair, the weight of failure pressing down on him. We tried to warn them, he said softly. But they wouldn't listen, Rachel placed a hand on his shoulder. We still have a chance, she said. If we can convince this thing that not all humans are like Doyle, maybe we can still find a way to coexist. Ethan nodded slowly. Then let's hope it's willing to listen. As the Nova Seeker turned back toward the heart of the nebula, the crew braced themselves for what lay ahead. They had faced the unknown once before and survived. Now they would have to do it again, but this time the stakes were higher than ever. The Nova Seeker drifted silently through the Helios Nebula, its crew tense and exhausted. The destruction of General Doyle's fleet had left them shaken, but they couldn't afford to dwell on it. Captain Ethan Cole knew they had one last chance to prevent further bloodshed and failure wasn't an option. As they approached the heart of the nebula, the entity reappeared. Its massive form loomed before them, a swirling mass of light and shadow that seemed alive with energy. This time, however, it didn't attack. Instead, it hovered motionlessly, as if waiting for them to make the first move. Ethan turned to Dr. Rachel Bennett. "Can we communicate again?" he asked. Rachel nodded, her fingers already flying over the console. "I'll try," she said. "But I don't know if it will trust us after what just happened." Using the symbols they'd decoded earlier, Rachel sent a message explaining that Doyle's actions were not representative of humanity as a whole. She emphasized their desire for peace and understanding, hoping the entity would see them as allies, rather than enemies. For several agonizing minutes, there was no response. The crew held their breath, watching the glowing mass intently. Then, slowly, the entity began to pulse with light. Patterns emerged, symbols similar to the ones they'd seen before, but more intricate this time. "It's responding," Rachel sighed, her voice trembling with excitement. "It's asking questions again." "What kind of questions?" Ethan asked. "Deeper ones," Rachel replied. "About our history, our values, how we treat other species. It's like it's trying to decide whether we're worth saving or destroying." Ethan frowned. "Then we'd better give it the right answers." With Rachel translating, the crew worked together to craft a response. They shared stories of humanity's achievements, their art, their science, their capacity for compassion. But they also acknowledged their flaws, their greed, their wars, their tendency to exploit others for personal gain. It was a risky move, exposing their weaknesses, but Ethan believed honesty was their best chance. The entity absorbed the information, its light flickering in complex patterns. Then something unexpected happened. A projection appeared in the center of the Nova Seeker-S bridge, a holographic image of a civilization long gone. Towering structures, advanced technology, and beings unlike anything the crew had ever seen filled the air around them. Rachel gasped. "This must be who created this thing," she whispered. "These are its creators." Ethan stared at the images, his mind racing. "If this entity is all that's left of them, then it's not just intelligent, it's a guardian. It's protecting their legacy." The hologram shifted, showing scenes of devastation. Planets burning, cities crumbling, entire species wiped out. The message was clear. This civilization had fallen victim to its own hubris, much like humanity risked doing now. "They're warning us," Rachel said softly. "They're telling us what happens when a species grows too powerful without learning restraint." Ethan nodded grimly. "And they think we're heading down the same path." Before they could respond further, the entity pulsed violently, its light growing blindingly bright. The crew shielded their eyes as the ship shook, alarms blaring once again. When the light finally dimmed, the entity had changed. It was smaller now, almost gentle in appearance, though still radiating immense power. Rachel studied the new symbols appearing on the monitors. "It's offering us a choice," she said. "Cooperation or annihilation. If we agree to respect the boundaries of other civilizations, if we promise not to repeat the mistakes of the past, it will let us live. But if we refuse—" She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Everyone understood the implication. Refusal meant extinction. Ethan took a deep breath. "We accept," he said firmly. "Tell it we'll honor its terms." Rachel typed furiously, relaying the message. For a moment there was silence. Then the entity pulsed once more, this time in a warm, soothing rhythm. It retreated slightly, allowing the Nova Seeker to pass unharmed. "Well," Lieutenant Daniel Hughes said, breaking the tension. "That was terrifying, but I guess we're still alive." Commander Ava Lewis crossed her arms, her expression thoughtful. "For now. But how do we convince the Empire to keep its promise? You saw what happened with Doyle. There will always be people who think they can take what they want." "That's our next challenge," Ethan admitted. "We need to make sure everyone understands what's at stake." When the Nova Seeker returned to planet Solace, the news of Doyle's defeat spread quickly. The Imperial Council convened yet again, this time under far graver circumstances. Admiral Lavra Hayes presided over the meeting, her face pale with worry. "We lost an entire fleet," she said, And for what? To prove we're stronger than something we don't even understand? General Matthew Doyle sat quietly in the corner, his usual arrogance replaced by shame. He hadn't spoken since returning from the nebula, where he'd barely escaped the entity's wrath. His flagship had been destroyed, and only a handful of ships managed to retreat in time. Ethan stood before the council, recounting everything that had happened. He described the entity's intelligence, its connection to an ancient civilization, and its ultimatum. "This isn't about dominance anymore," he said. "It's about survival. If we don't change our ways, we'll end up like the creators of this entity gone forever." Dr. Rachel Bennett stepped forward, holding up her tablet. "I've been analyzing the data," she said. "This entity doesn't just destroy, it preserves. It acts as a safeguard against species that pose a threat to the balance of the galaxy. We were lucky it gave us a second chance. Next time, we might not be so fortunate." The council members exchanged uneasy glances. Some were visibly shaken, while others remained skeptical. One senator spoke up. "Even if we agree to these terms, how do we enforce them? Humanity has always expanded outward. How do we stop ourselves from repeating the same mistakes?" "We start by acknowledging the problem," Ethan replied. "We document what happened here. We share the knowledge of this entity with every colony, every outpost, every ship. And we create laws to ensure we respect the boundaries of other civilizations." Admiral Hayes nodded. "It won't be easy," she said, "but it's necessary. If we want to survive, we have to adapt." In the weeks that followed, the Empire began implementing sweeping changes. New regulations were introduced, limiting expansion into uncharted territories. Diplomatic efforts were strengthened, focusing on peaceful coexistence with neighboring species. Meanwhile, Rachel continued her research, working tirelessly to decode more of the entity's language in hopes of deepening their understanding. Despite the progress, tensions lingered. Not everyone agreed with the new policies. Some factions within the Empire viewed the restrictions as a betrayal of human ambition. Whispers of rebellion began to spread, fueled by those who refused to accept the idea of living in harmony with forces they couldn't control. Ethan knew the road ahead wouldn't be smooth. The entity had given humanity a lifeline, but maintaining that trust would require constant vigilance. Still, he felt a glimmer of hope. For the first time in centuries, the Empire was forced to confront its own limitations, and perhaps in doing so, it could evolve into something greater. One evening, as Ethan stood on the observation deck of the Nova Seeker, gazing out at the stars, Rachel joined him. "Do you think we made the right decision?" she asked. "I think we did what we had to," Ethan replied. "Whether it's enough remains to be seen, but at least we tried," Rachel smiled faintly. "That's more than most species get the chance to do?" Ethan nodded, his eyes fixed on the distant glow of the Helios Nebula. Somewhere within those swirling clouds, the entity waited, watching. It had spared them for now. But the future depended on whether humanity could rise to meet the challenge it presented. As the stars twinkled above, Ethan allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection. The galaxy was vast and full of mysteries, but one truth was certain: humanity's place in it was no longer guaranteed. From this point forward, every decision mattered. Every action counted. And for the first time in a long time, Ethan felt ready to face whatever came next. The changes sweeping through the Galactic Empire were both swift and uneasy. New laws limiting expansion into uncharted territories sparked heated debates across every level of society. Some saw them as necessary steps toward survival, while others viewed them as chains binding humanity's natural drive to explore and conquer. Captain Ethan Cole found himself caught in the middle of it all, tasked with ensuring compliance with the entity's demands while facing growing resistance from those who believed the Empire should fight back instead of bowing to an unknown force. On planet Solace, the Imperial Council worked tirelessly to enforce the new regulations. Admiral Lovar Hayes led the effort, her voice firm but weary as she addressed dissenting factions. "This isn't about surrender," she told a group of senators during one particularly tense meeting. "It's about survival. If we push too far, If we ignore the warnings we've been given, we risk everything. But not everyone was convinced. Senator Mark Allen, a vocal critic of the restrictions, slammed his fist on the table. "You're asking us to abandon centuries of progress," he shouted. "We built this empire because we dared to go where no one else would. Are you really telling me we should just stop? Let some alien force dictate our future?" Admiral Hayes met his gaze without flinching. "Yes," she said simply. "Because that alien force has already proven it can destroy us? Do you want to gamble the lives of billions on your pride?" The room fell silent, the weight of her words sinking in. Still, Ethan knew arguments like this wouldn't end any time soon. The Empire had always prided itself on its strength and ambition. Convincing people to embrace humility and restraint was going to take time and patience. Back aboard the Nova Seeker, Ethan and his crew prepared for another mission. This time, they weren't heading into the Helios Nebula. Instead, their destination was a remote colony on the edge of Imperial Spacer region known for harboring rebels who opposed the new laws. Reports suggested that these groups were planning unauthorized expeditions into restricted zones, ignoring the entity's warnings entirely. As the ship approached the colony, Lieutenant Daniel Hughes guided it into orbit, scanning the surface for signs of activity. "Looks like they're building ships," he reported. "Big ones," Commander Ava Lewis frowned. "They're preparing for war," she said grimly, "against the entity or against us." Ethan nodded. "Let's find out what they're up to." The team landed discreetly outside the colonies. Main settlement, blending in among traders and travelers, Dr. Rachel Bennett stayed behind on the ship, monitoring communications and analyzing data. Meanwhile, Ethan, Ava, and Daniel ventured into the heart of the colony, where tensions were high. In the central square, crowds gathered around makeshift stages, listening to fiery speeches from rebel leaders. One man stood out, a charismatic figure named Jacob Reed, whose passionate rhetoric drew cheers from the crowd. "They call it protection," he declared, pointing accusingly at the sky. "But I call it oppression. The Empire wants to keep us caged, afraid of something they don't even understand. Well, I say enough is enough." The crowd erupted in applause, their anger palpable. Ethan exchanged a glance with Ava. "This could get ugly fast," he muttered. "We need to talk to him," Ava replied, "before things escalate." Jacob noticed them almost immediately, his sharp eyes narrowing as he stepped down from the stage. "And who might you be?" he asked, his tone suspicious. "Captain Ethan Cole," Ethan introduced himself calmly. "Imperial Fleet, we're here to discuss the situation." Jacob smirked. "Of course you are. Sent by the Empire to shut us down, right?" "No," Ethan said firmly. "We're here to listen. To understand why you feel the way you do." For a moment, Jacob hesitated. Then, with a shrug, he gestured for them to follow him. They retreated to a quieter corner of the settlement, where Jacob explained his grievances. "Look, I get it," he said. "The Empire's scared? That thing in the nebula, it's powerful. No doubt about it, but running away isn't the answer. Humanity survives because we adapt, because we overcome. If we let fear rule us, we'll lose everything we've built." Ethan listened carefully, choosing his words with care. "I respect your courage," he said finally. "But have you considered the cost of defiance? That thing isn't just powerful, it's ancient. It's seen civilizations rise and fall. If it decides we're a threat, it won't hesitate to act." Jacob shook his head. "You don't know that. None of us do. All we know is that the Empire's giving up, without a fight. And I refuse to stand by and watch." Before Ethan could respond, an alarm blared in the distance. A scout ship streaked across the sky, firing warning shots over the colony. Panic spread as settlers scrambled for cover. Jacob cursed under his breath. "They sent enforcers," he growled. "Guess the Empire doesn't want to hear our side after all." Ethan clenched his fists. "That wasn't my decision," he said. "But if you resist now, you'll only make things worse. Stand down and we can work together to find a solution." Jacob stared at him for a long moment, then sighed. "Fine," he said reluctantly, "but this isn't over." As the enforcers landed and began rounding up the rebels, Ethan felt a pang of guilt. He didn't agree with Jacob's methods, but he understood the frustration driving them. Forcing compliance wasn't going to solve anything, not in the long run. Back on the Nova Seeker, Rachel greeted them with grim news. The rebels weren't the only ones planning something, she said. I intercepted communications from several other colonies. They're forming alliances, pooling resources to build fleets capable of challenging the entity. Ethan sank into a chair, rubbing his temples. How many? At least 5 major groups, Rachel replied. And probably more we don't know about yet. This is exactly what we were afraid of, Ava said, pacing the room. If they provoke the entity again, it won't show mercy next time. We need to stop them before it's too late, Ethan said. But how? We can't monitor every colony, every ship. Rachel hesitated. Maybe we don't have to, she said slowly. What if we use the entity's language? Send a message directly to these groups, warning them of the consequences. Ethan raised an eyebrow. You think they'll listen? They might, Rachel admitted. Especially if they see proof of what happened to Doyle's fleet. Fear can be a powerful motivator. With no better options, the crew agreed to try. Using the symbols they'd decoded, Rachel crafted a message combining stark imagery of the entity's power with clear warnings about its capabilities. They broadcasted across multiple channels, targeting the rebel groups specifically. Days passed with no immediate response. Then, unexpectedly, a reply came. It wasn't from the rebels, but from the entity itself. The Nova Seeker shuddered as the glowing mass reappeared surrounding the ship once more. Its light pulsed rhythmically, projecting symbols onto every screen. Rachel worked quickly to translate, her face pale with concentration. It's acknowledging our efforts, she said finally. But it's also testing us. It wants proof that we're serious about keeping our promise. How do we prove that? Ethan asked. Rachel hesitated. By making a sacrifice? A sacrifice? Ava echoed. What kind of sacrifice? Rachel turned to face them, her expression grave. It's asking for a gesture of goodwill, a demonstration that we value peace over conquest. Specifically, the destruction of one of our own ships. The room fell silent. Ethan stared at her, struggling to process what she'd said. Destroying one of their own vessels wasn't just costly, it was symbolic. It meant admitting weakness, showing vulnerability to both allies and enemies alike. Finally, Ethan spoke. If it's what it takes to prevent further conflict, we'll do it. But we need to choose wisely. After much deliberation, they selected an aging battleship stationed near the nebula. It was old and nearing retirement, but still functional, a perfect candidate for the gesture. As the crew watched from the Nova Seeker, the battleship self-destructed in a brilliant explosion, its remains drifting silently into the void. The entity responded almost immediately. Its light softened, pulsing gently as if satisfied. Then it withdrew, leaving the crew alone once more. Well, Daniel said quietly, that was intense. Ethan nodded, feeling a mix of relief and unease. They had taken a step toward earning the entity's trust, but maintaining it would require constant effort. The galaxy was changing, and humanity's role within it was uncertain. Yet amidst the chaos, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the right path. As the Nova Seeker set course for home, Ethan gazed out at the stars, his mind racing with possibilities. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in a long time he felt hopeful. Perhaps, just perhaps, humanity could learn to live alongside forces far greater than themselves. The destruction of the aging battleship sent ripples through the Galactic Empire. News of the event spread quickly, carried by both official channels and whispered rumors. For some, it was a sign of hope, a gesture proving humanity's willingness to adapt and coexist with forces beyond their understanding. For others, it was an act of weakness, a betrayal of the Empire's core values. The divide between those who supported the new laws and those who opposed them deepened, threatening to tear the Empire apart. Captain Ethan Cole stood in the Imperial Council chamber on planet Solace, listening as arguments erupted around him. Senator Mark Allen slammed his fist on the table once again, his face red with anger. "You destroyed one of our ships," he shouted, "a symbol of our strength. How can we expect anyone to respect us now?" Admiral Lavra Hayes remained calm, her voice steady despite the rising tension. "This wasn't about respect," she said. "It was about survival. The entity demanded proof that we're serious about peace. We gave it what it wanted. And what happens when they demand more?" Allen countered. "Will we keep destroying our own resources until there's nothing left? Or will we finally admit that this is madness?" Ethan stepped forward, drawing everyone's attention. "This isn't madness," he said firmly. "It's a chance. To change for the better. Yes, it's uncomfortable. Yes, it challenges everything we believe about ourselves. But if we don't take this opportunity, we risk losing far more than a single ship." His words silenced the room, but the tension lingered. Ethan knew the debate wouldn't end here. There would always be voices calling for defiance, urging humanity to assert its dominance no matter the cost. Still, he felt a small sense of victory. At least some people were beginning to see the bigger picture. Meanwhile, Dr. Rachel Bennett worked tirelessly in her lab, analyzing the data collected during their encounters with the entity. She had spent countless hours decoding its language, piecing together fragments of meaning from the glowing symbols. What she discovered was both fascinating and sobering. "This thing isn't just intelligent, it's ancient," she explained to Ethan during one of their late-night conversations. "Its creators were a civilization far older than ours, capable of feats we can barely imagine. They built the entity as a guardian, designed to protect the galaxy from species that grew too powerful without learning restraint." Ethan frowned. "So it's not just protecting itself, it's protecting others too." "Exactly," Rachel replied. "Think of it like a cosmic balance. If a species disrupts that balance by expanding recklessly, exploiting others, or causing harm, the entity steps in to restore order." "That explains why it reacted so strongly to Doyle's fleet," Ethan said thoughtfully. "He saw it as a threat, but really it saw him as the danger." Rachel nodded. "And it sees us the same way if we let ambition blind us." Ethan sighed, leaning back in his chair. "Then we need to prove we're different, that we've learned our lesson." But proving that wouldn't be easy. Reports continued to trickle in from across the Empire, detailing unauthorized expeditions into restricted zones and growing unrest among rebel factions. Some colonies openly defied the new laws, while others quietly prepared for conflict. It seemed that no matter how hard the Council tried to enforce compliance, resistance persisted. One evening, as Ethan reviewed the latest intelligence reports, Commander Ava Lewis approached him with troubling news. "We've detected unusual activity near the Helios Nebula," she said. "Multiple ships, moving in formation. They're heading straight for it." Ethan's heart sank. "Who are they?" "They call themselves the Free Alliance," Ava replied. "A coalition of rogue colonies and rebel groups. Their leader claims they're going to conquer the nebula and reclaim it for humanity." Ethan clenched his fists. "They have no idea what they're up against. We need to stop them," Ava said firmly. "If they provoke the entity, it could mean disaster not just for them, but for everyone." Ethan agreed. Gathering his crew, he prepared the Nova Seeker for another mission. This time, however, they weren't alone. Admiral Hayes had authorized a small contingent of ships to accompany them, tasked with intercepting the Free Alliance. Before they reached the nebula dot, as they approached the rebel fleet, tensions ran high. The Free Alliance consisted of dozens of vessels, each armed to the teeth and brimming with determination. Their leader, Jacob Reed, hailed them almost immediately. "Turn back," he warned. "This doesn't concern you." "It concerns all of us," Ethan replied. "If you go any further, you'll provoke something none of us can fight," Jacob sneered. "You're scared. That's why you destroyed your own ship to appease some alien monster." "Well, we're not afraid. We'll show you what true courage looks like." Before Ethan could respond, the Free Alliance launched an attack. Energy beams streaked through space, forcing the Imperial fleet to scatter. Ethan gritted his teeth as the battle unfolded, knowing full well the stakes involved. Every shot fired brought them closer to catastrophe. "Contact the entity," he ordered Rachel. "Tell it we're trying to stop them." Rachel worked quickly, transmitting a message using the decoded symbols. Moments later, the nebula erupted in a burst of light. The entity emerged, larger and more imposing than ever, its tendrils lashing out with terrifying speed. The rebels froze, their weapons trained on the massive shape hovering before them. Jacob's voice crackled over the comms. What? What is that?" "It's the reason we warned you," Ethan said grimly. "Now, stand down or face the consequences." For a moment, it seemed Jacob might listen. Then, with a snarl, he ordered his fleet to fire. The entity absorbed the attacks effortlessly, its light growing brighter with each impact. Then, with a single pulse of energy, it obliterated half the rebel fleet in an instant. Panic spread as survivors scrambled to retreat. Jacob's flagship attempted to flee, but the entity pursued, wrapping it in tendrils of energy. The ship shuddered violently, then went dark, drifting lifelessly into the void. Ethan watched in silence, his stomach churning. They had done everything they could to prevent this, but it hadn't been enough. When the Nova Seeker returned to Planet Solace, the Empire was gripped by fear and uncertainty. Images of the battle had been broadcast across every channel, leaving no doubt about the entity's power. Rebel factions dissolved overnight, their leaders either captured or killed. Even the most vocal critics of the new laws fell silent, unwilling to risk provoking such a force again. In the weeks that followed, the Imperial Council implemented stricter measures to ensure compliance. Colonies were monitored closely, and unauthorized expeditions were met with swift punishment. Slowly, reluctantly, humanity began to adapt. Ethan found himself reflecting on the journey they'd taken. From the initial encounter with the entity to the sacrifices made along the way, every step had been a lesson in humility and restraint. Humanity had always prided itself on its strength and ambition, but now, faced with a force beyond comprehension, it had learned the value of caution. One evening, as he stood on the observation deck of the Nova Seeker, gazing out at the stars, Rachel joined him. "Do you think we've earned its trust?" she asked softly. "I don't know," Ethan admitted. "But I think we've earned a chance. A chance to prove we're capable of change," Rachel smiled faintly. "That's more than most civilizations get." Ethan nodded, his eyes fixed on the distant glow of the Helios Nebula. Somewhere within those swirling clouds, the entity waited, watching. It had spared them for now, but the future depended on whether humanity could rise to meet the challenge it presented. As the stars twinkled above, Ethan allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection. The galaxy was vast and full of mysteries, but one truth was certain: humanity's place in it was no longer guaranteed. From this point forward, every decision mattered. Every action counted. And for the first time in a long time, Ethan felt ready to face whatever came next.